It is now at this point in the story when Charlie makes the single-handedly stupidest decision that anyone makes in any of these books. How's it going, YouTube lovers? This is the Evil Rainmaker. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm doing something special. This is the start of a brand new series on my channel. This is Eabs Book Club. With this series, I'm planning to take some nerdy books that I read and then do videos where I review them, I summarize their story, I talk about what I like, what I didn't like, theorize about a couple things, just generally talk about some of the books that I've read. In a way, this is kind of like a spiritual successor to the bird brain theory videos that I used to do, which, you know, my trailer reactions kind of took over because I talk about my theories in those for movies now. But this is a brand new series where I'm going to be talking about nerdy books, and I've got the perfect trilogy of books to kick off this series with after the content that has been out just in the world and on my channel this year. And it really is fitting that this is the beginning, because that's right, as you see in the thumbnail and title, I am talking about the FNAF Silver Eyes Trilogy. These books tell a story using a lot of familiar elements and names and, like, general ideas from the games, but it tells it in a whole new way in a whole new universe. These books are co-written by Scott Cawthon, the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, and Breed-Wrisley. Sorry if I mispronounced that, I do not know how to say your name. I took my best shot at it. Who started as a playwright in New York with her writing career. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the books in order, including things like story summary. I'm going to talk about the main characters. I'm going to interject my thoughts here and there about the books themselves and plot points and things like that. And at the end of the video, after I've talked about all three of the books, I'm going to rank them amongst themselves with my personal rankings. Anyway, with that intro out of the way, let's get right into the stories. Warning, before we continue, I must make it clear that this is a spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about the entire plot of all three of these books combined. And I will also, another warning here, not just for spoilers, for personal opinions, even scarier. I'm going to be talking about my personal feelings on this book. This may not align with yours, but this is my video. I'm doing what I want. First up, we have Book 1, The Silver Eyes. First, let's talk about our primary characters. Our protagonist, our main character, is Charlotte Emily, also known as Charlie. She is 17 years old and the daughter of the late owner of the Freddys restaurant, Henry Emily. She currently lives with her Aunt Jen, and she only remembers pieces of her childhood. This is going to be a major driving force for her character going forward, so it's important to keep that in mind. Another major character we have is John, Charlie's childhood friend and also her crush. He's a very one-dimensional character in this book, but he gets better later, I promise. We also have Clay Burke, the chief of police in Hurricane, Utah, the main city where all of this takes place. He was the detective during the missing children's incidents 10 years earlier. Yeah, this book's taking place 10 years after the infamous missing children's incident that's part of Five Nights at Freddy's lore. Clay is also the father of Carlton, one of Charlie's best friends. Speaking of Charlie's friends, there are a lot of them in this book, and I'm going to kind of bundle them as one character for this introduction because, honestly, there's just so many to keep track of. I honestly switched some of them up when I was reading the story because there were just too many. Other than Carlton, we also have Jessica, Lamar, Marla, and Jason, Marla's younger stepbrother. Alright, so these are the main characters. Let's go ahead and get into the story of the Silver Eyes. We begin in 1995 in Hurricane, Utah, which is, by the way, a real city. I actually looked it up, and pretty much every city or town that's mentioned in these books is a real location in southwest Utah. Credits to Scott and Kira for doing the research on this one. Charlie is back in town for the dedication of a scholarship, which is in honor of her friend Michael, who also went missing 10 years earlier. After stopping by her abandoned childhood home to look around, she meets up with Jessica, John, and Carlton at a local diner. They get to talking about the Freddys restaurant, and eventually, in proper horror character fashion, they go to the abandoned building to check it out. They find that there was actually a mall being built around the whole thing, but eventually construction was abandoned on that as well, and there's just this shell of a mall built around the still intact pizzeria that's in the middle. The next day, the rest of Charlie's friends arrive, and they attend the scholarship ceremony, where Michael's parents also name the other children who went missing 10 years ago during the incident. Really puts into perspective for Charlie and her friends that it wasn't just Michael, it wasn't just their lives that were ruined. there were a lot of families that were impacted by this whole thing. Now fully reunited, the friends go to Freddy's again that night, but they leave after Charlie is injured by Foxy's hook. It malfunctions, cuts her arm, and so they leave. Again, why are you going back to the abandoned building? Because it's a horror book. Move along! That night, Charlie recalls fragments of memories of a time when there was another location that her dad used to own. That morning, she convinces John to drive her to the town of New Harmony nearby and look for the diner. They find Fredbear's Family Diner, a much smaller restaurant than Freddy's Pizzeria, and Charlie is overwhelmed with memories when she gets there, and she recalls that at one point she had a twin brother named Sammy she was playing with him in a closet there while her dad was working, and then a man in a Spring Bonnie costume walks in, grabbed her brother, and was never seen again. Now we have an even more personal connection to Charlie in this story. It's not just her friend that went missing, it was her only sibling as well. And that happened years before the missing children's incident. She was only like 3 years old when her brother was taken. Friends go to Freddy's that night, again, but the guard who's been walking around the mall at night is there waiting for them. He introduces himself as Dave Miller, and he agrees not to call the cops on them if he can go into the pizzeria with them and keep an eye on them. Inside, Dave activates the animatronics with a control panel and slips away in the chaos. He puts on the Spring Bonnie suit, which is in storage there at the building, and abducts Carlton, He puts on the Spring Bonnie suit, which is stored in the building. He abducts Carlton, which Jason, Marla's younger brother, watches happen. They actually call the cops after this happens, and Carlton's missing. And Clay, Carlton's dad, if you recall, is the chief of police, believes that his son is just playing a stupid prank, because his son is a prankster. He's just doing something in bad taste. He takes the teens to his home so that they can rest, and his deputy checks out the restaurant to just investigate a little bit further. But while he's there, Spring Bonnie pops up, grabs Dunn, and stabs him. So we already have a death! Congratulations, Dunn, you're officially a red shirt. That morning, when everyone wakes up, Clay's wife convinces him to, actually take the disappearance of their child seriously. And while they're doing that, Charlie and John leave again on their own to figure out what's up with Fredbear's Family Diner. What is that all about? They looking at newspaper articles and things. They're in a library. They're looking at stuff in Charlie's own home. They're looking everywhere. Eventually, Charlie actually explains to John that the reason she left town is because after the missing children's incident, her father, Henry, was suspected of killing them because it was his restaurant and everything, and no one was ever seen. And eventually, Henry took his own life. He built a robot, and it killed him, and poor Charlie got a glimpse of it. Poor, 7-year-old Charlie got a glimpse of it when her Aunt Jen took her away from the home and away from Hurricane for the last 10 years. But that's not the biggest reveal of the day, because Charlie and John find an old newspaper about the disappearances, and they recognize that Henry has a business partner in the photo, and they know exactly who it is. But that's when Marla bursts into the room and says that her brother Jason ran off to find Carlton himself because he saw it happen. So, we've got the child running off alone. We've already lost one kid to Freddy's. It's basically all going down. Everyone has to go back to Freddy's again, despite the fact that they shouldn't have been there in the first place. The friends return to Freddy's, and they do find Jason fairly quickly, but they also see Carlton in one of the back rooms on the camera system. Charlie runs off to go find him alone, because she is going to do this multiple times in the novels, and it drives me crazy. But unfortunately for her, the animatronics are now active, and she has to avoid characters like Bonnie chasing her down into the bathrooms, but she is able to evade them and get to the back room where Carlton is, and she finds that he has been placed into a Springlock suit. And who put him there? Of course, Dave. Because Dave, it turns out, was actually Henry's business partner, William Afton. This is actually the first time that William Afton is mentioned as an actual name in the Freddy series, and it came from a book that's not even canon to the games. But turns out Dave was actually Henry's business partner and the murderer. Charlie manages to free Carlton from the suit because of everything that she learned from her dad about Springlocks. When Dave comes into the room to check on Carlton, she knocks him over the head with a metal pipe and knocks him out, and then they make a run for it. But the animatronics are everywhere, and the building is blocked off, so they have to hide. But they need answers, so they go back to the back room as a full group, they tie up Dave, and they make him talk. He assures them that the animatronics are not going to hurt him, because they consider that he is one of them. but they see the teens as adults, and they don't like adults, and they will kill them before the night is up. With this absolutely useless non-information from William Afton, the friends try to find another way out, but they are eventually hunted down and surrounded by the animatronics, and they're about to be killed, but then another animatronic steps in and stops the others. It's Golden Freddy, and they realize that their friend Michael is possessing Golden Freddy, and he just saved them. It was at this time that Clay actually burst down the door to save the day, because he also made the connection that William Afton was responsible and he was still here. But as they're trying to leave, Afton shows up in the spring Bonnie suit and grabs Charlie, threatening to kill her if they don't give in to his demands. Though, again, unfortunate for him, as we've established, Charlie understands Springlocks, and she sets off the ones in his suit, and he drops her as the Springlocks all go off, and he is crushed to death. The friends leave as the animatronics drag Afton back into the building, and that is where our story comes to a close. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It tonally felt so much like the original games. It had the proper amount of mystery. It had answers for us for the actual games as well, such as William Afton's name. And it was just really fun to see a full story that has the animatronics describing them stalking their prey and breaking down doors, which are things you really didn't get to see them do because of the nature of the original games. I will say that there were too many characters in this. Like I said at the beginning, I kind of lumped all of Charlie's friends except for John kind of together. There were a couple standouts occasionally, Carlton getting kidnapped or things like that. But in the end, there was just too many characters, and I was actually surprised that none of them died during it, because I thought, there's so many characters, clearly someone's going to die, right? No, the only one who actually dies during the events of the book, besides, the missing children, is the deputy. Random red shirt deputy. So, I was surprised by that for sure. It's just too many characters, but luckily there's still 2 more books to get to know them, so let's go ahead right into the next one. Next up, we have The Twisted Ones. Once again, Charlie is our main character in the story. She's 18 now and going to college, but she's been having nightmares about her brother Sammy, and she wants answers to her past again. That is her main motivating factor going forward in this story. We also have John back. He now works at construction at Hurricane, and he finally gets to be an actual character in this book. He's not just a one-dimensional generic love interest insert like he was in the first book. Another main character we have is Charlie's friend Jessica. She's Charlie's roommate in college now, and she's practically like a sister with how close that they've grown over the past year. And I absolutely love her character. It is great to have her here. We actually get to have a smaller focus. Not as many of Charlie's friends appear in this one. It's mainly John and Jessica when it comes to her friend group. And there's only really one other main character, and that's Clay Burke. He's still chief of police in Hurricane, but he's let the incident from a year ago, where his son was taken and almost killed, really consume him to the point that his wife has left him. So we have a very broken man, but he's still there. He's still there to protect the town of Hurricane. Alright, so let's go ahead. Now that we have our characters established, let's check out the story of the Twisted Ones. Like I said, it's been a year since the events of the first book, and Charlie is really struggling to live a normal life as she's going to St. George College. This is not the actual name of the college, this is just what it's called in the book. I looked up, though, that in St. George is Utah Tech University, and since Charlie is studying robotics, it makes sense if this is the college that she is attending, so it's probably the real-life inspiration is Utah Tech for this. She's been working on a class project for a while. These 2 talking robot heads that only actually notice a human in the room with them if the human wears a special earpiece that lets out a particular signal. She built these robots using parts from one of her childhood toys that she took from her dad's old house after she left Hurricane again. She cleared out a bunch of the stuff that was there. The fact that she took stuff from her house and the fact that she's working on this earpiece are actually really important pieces of information, but it's not going to be in this book. That's in the next book. So just keep that in the back of your mind for when we get to the 3rd and final book. Charlie meets up with John for the first time in a year, and it's a very fun reunion. And while they're going to get something to eat, he tells Charlie that a storm came through the area, Hurricane got hit really hard, and her dad's house in particular has been completely demolished by the storm. Before they part ways, though, John finally builds up the courage to ask Charlie out on a date. At first she just says, yeah, sure, what's the big deal? But he has to ask her several times before it finally gets through her brain exactly what he's asking. I honestly love this scene because it adds a bit more personality to Charlie and John, and I can practically see the light bulb going off over her head when I read this book, and it was a really entertaining scene. So yeah, after a year of feeling like she wasn't fitting in, she has a date on the schedule, Charlie's finally feeling happy. So yeah, after a year of struggling to, have a normal life, Charlie has a date scheduled, she's finally feeling happy, but then she runs into Clay Burke. He tells her that there was a body that they found in a field, and he takes her there to see it because it is so mangled up and it looks like it was because of Springlocks. Charlie confirms that it looks like Springlock injuries, and so she asks Clay what happened to the animatronics and everything at Freddy's. He said that Demolition and everything started working on clearing out the building, but of course they had to stop when the storm hit. But by the time, he said that the animatronics were already gone, but they never found Afton's body. Again, we last saw it being dragged back into the restaurant by the animatronics themselves. They never found the body, but they did find a pool of fake blood where Afton got springlocked by the suit. And so let the uncertainty settle onto Charlie as the story really gets going now. Again, this is the first chapter. We've already got a mangled corpse and a missing dead murderer. This is great. It's off to a great start. Charlie arrives late to her date with John, but even then, Charlie arrives late to her date with John, and at the same time, she also can't get the mangled corpse out of her head. I mean, how would you? You just saw this, you're supposed to just pretend like that never happened? So the next day, she drags Jessica with her back to Hurricane so they can look at Freddy's firsthand. It's, pretty empty. Again, like Clay said, storm stopped all progress, and a lot of stuff has already been cleared out by what the investigators were able to do, but they keep digging a little deeper, and underneath one of the stages, crammed into a small compartment, they find Afton's body, rotting away, but still inside the Springlock suit. So Charlie's like, okay, Afton's actually dead. He's not responsible for this. So what happened to get this person springlocked? While she's driving back to St. George, Charlie sees a bunch of vultures circling overhead in a field and pulls over to check it out, finding yet another mangled body that has Springlock injuries. Except this time, it is a woman who bears a surprising resemblance to Charlie herself. She calls Clay over, and when Clay is looking at the body, he also lets Charlie know that they found a third corpse that also has Springlock injuries. The list of people that are being killed by this are just getting longer, and so Charlie asks Clay, and actually convinces him, takes a little bit of convincing because, he's still a cop, has to do his job, to let her have a head start to check out the latest victims' homes so she can see if there's anything unusual that she might recognize. She goes there, but the house looks pretty normal. The only weird thing that she finds is when she goes to the backyard, she finds several grave-sized mounds of dirt in a row in the backyard. There's nothing there, but that's all she sees. Arriving late once again to another date with John, Charlie tells him about what's going on, because she has to tell somebody about all these bodies that she's seen. She's always spoken to Clay about it so far. Well, Jessica kinda knows there's something going on. Obviously, she went to Freddy's with her, but she didn't tell her about the bodies. So, she convinces John to go with her back to Hurricane again, but this time not to Freddy's, to her dad's old house. They find it in the state just like John said, where the storm completely tore it apart, and after going through the workshop and not finding anything, they spy that there is a crack in the wall caused by the storm, and there's a room back there that Charlie has never seen before. Inside, she sees a bunch of grave-sized holes just like the ones that were in the victim's backyard, but they're not all empty this time. There is a weird, smooth, doll-like version of Foxy sitting in one of these holes. Alright, so next tip, I have to describe this full scene, because this is probably my absolute favorite scene in the entire trilogy of these books. A piercing screech rips through the air, which causes John to feel nauseous to the point that he is unable to stand and is doubling over. The Foxy animatronic suddenly comes to life, bubbling flesh magically appearing on its body as it lunges forward and grabs Charlie. It opens its chest open and starts pulling her in closer, revealing the Springlocks inside, intent on crushing and killing her. But John is able to get enough of his bearings to rip off Foxy's head and shut down the animatronic before it crushes Charlie. This scene was absolutely wild to read, and is such a cool sudden moment, because again, they're looking at this animatronic, and you would think something might happen with it, but I was not expecting, bubbling flesh to appear and John to feel nauseous. That whole scene was awesome to read and easily my favorite part of the whole series. Now that the animatronic has been dealt with, Charlie gets a chance to look at it closer, and inspecting it, she finds a small disc on it. And when she activates it with a little switch on the side, that same piercing screech appears, and the appearance of the animatronic physically changes in front of them. Apparently that sound that it's producing is actually creating some kind of illusion that anyone who hears it can see. Charlie recalls that she saw a similar disc when she was going through all the stuff that her dad had made. So they go back to her dorm room and they dig through her stuff and they do find it. But on this other disc there is a notable difference. Engraved on it in letters it reads, Afton Robotics, LLC. Once again, it ties back to old William Afton. They team up with Jessica for this. We have a full trilogy of main characters here, and they plot out points on a map where all the bodies were found, and they discover a pretty disturbing pattern. There is a straight line from Charlie's old house straight towards her dorm room. These animatronics are after her. They decide to track down where they believe the animatronics to be at the moment. Using the map, they go there and they look around and they actually find freshly dug grave-sized holes that have the animatronics buried in them. They properly figured out what's going on. Of course, it means Charlie's in danger, but at least they know what's happening. And then they actually make a smart horror decision. They call Clay, the chief of police, for backup. That's great. When Clay arrives and he learns of what's going on, he uses his power of authority to send an evacuation order to the buildings that are around the area so that all the residents can get out of there, claiming that there's a gas leak, something scary but not too over the top. Get people out of their homes, and then they wait for nightfall, because it seems like these animatronics only move at night and then bury themselves before sunrise. A few of them are sleeping, waiting in the car, and then suddenly they hear a scream. Not everyone evacuated, and they see an animatronic tearing off into the woods. They give chase, and Charlie eventually catches up to see a wolf-like animatronic. That's right, there was a wolf in Five Nights at Freddy's before Roxanne and Security Breach. Then the wolf animatronic opens its chest and dumps out another body of the woman that they just heard scream before it slinks back into the woods with a staring contest with Charlie. Clay arrives on the scene and attends to the woman, who is miraculously alive. She did not die to the Springlocks, and they arrive in time to keep her alive and bring her to the hospital. So that's one less victim. It's technically she's still a victim. One less dead victim, I should say. It is now at this point in the story when Charlie makes the single-handedly stupidest decision that anyone makes in any of these books. She decides the whole I'm not going to have anyone else die for me thing, and leaves on her own and waits for the animatronics to come for her, where she is easily captured by the twisted version of Freddy. Charlie's not always been the brightest character. I mean, this is a horror story. People have to make dumb decisions for some things to work. But this is like the absolute worst thing. They just turned around from having a smart decision where they got Clay involved as soon as they figured out what was going on, to Charlie literally running off on her own and telling no one where she was going. So, yep, she is captured, and her friends obviously notice that she is gone, but they don't know where the thing could have taken her, if she's even still alive. Clay then takes John and Jessica back to his house, because it turns out before he let the investigators go in there with forensics after, Afton was crushed by the Springlocks, he actually dragged all the animatronics in there, like Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, Foxy, put them into his car and brought them to his basement. And there they've just sat, not moving. John goes to them and he tries to talk to the spirits that are inhabiting them, asking if they have any idea where Charlie could have gone. And at first there's no response. The animatronics just sit there like they're statues. But then he mentions that William Afton might be involved. And at the mention of that name, all the animatronics start shaking violently, they come to life, they burst out of the basement, and they start making a beeline straight through the woods. With no better options, Clay, John, and Jessica decide to follow. Meanwhile, Charlie wakes up inside of the Twisted Freddy animatronic, surrounded by Springlocks. She carefully makes her way out of it without setting off the Springlocks, only to find herself in a strange, abandoned underground pizzeria. And what's even stranger is as she starts walking around, she starts seeing the world completely morph and shift around her, and there's an army of balloon boys chasing after her at times. Luckily, her friends arrive, and Clay starts shooting out the light bulbs in there, because it turns out those illusion discs are in all the light bulbs, and that what was causing reality to go completely insane as Charlie was running through. The Twisted animatronics are still there, however, and then their master steps forward, Springtrap. He was trapped in that stage, yes, but once Charlie and Jessica found him, he was able to leave of his own accord and find his inventions that have been hunting Charlie down. Clay fires his last bullet at Springtrap as a distraction, and they try to make a run for it, but Charlie once again breaks off from the group because she wants to chase Springtrap down herself and get answers about Sammy. The others, meanwhile, are surrounded by the other Twisted animatronics, and when it looks like they're about to be destroyed by them, the other OG animatronics arrive and start beating the crap out of their Twisted counterparts. It's a little goofy, but honestly, it's kind of cool to see robot versus robot in this book, so I'm okay with it. Meanwhile, Charlie actually catches up to Springtrap and confronts him, demanding to know why he took Sammy away that day. But then, in a completely baffling response, Springtrap tells her that he didn't take Sammy, he took her. And then he rolls away through an escape trapdoor and isn't seen from for the rest of the book. We're literally just left with that when it comes to him. But Charlie can't have time to process this either because the building is starting to collapse. Her friends catch up with her and they try to make it for the exit. And it turns out they find a tunnel that actually leads to the secret room that's inside of Charlie's house. That whole facility was underneath her house the whole time. While they're running though, Charlie stops because she sees these strange rectangular doors, almost like closets, all lined up in a row. And she's been subconsciously drawing rectangles in her school books and everything for the entirety of this novel. So she feels drawn to it. It's John that has to snap her out of it by telling her that he loves her so that he can start leading her towards the exit, but it's too late. The last surviving Twisted animatronic, which is Twisted Freddy, has caught up to them and it grabs Charlie, pulls her into its chest, and closes it with only her arms sticking out. John and Clay try frantically to open up the bot while Jessica holds onto Charlie's hand, but then they hear a click. The robot starts thrashing around like the sound of fireworks going off, and then it just lays still, with Charlie's bloody hand sticking out of it. She's been crushed by the Springlocks. This scene completely shocked me when I read it the first time. I was like, wait, she's our main character. Did you really just kill her off? But even nor John nor myself had time to process it because the building was still collapsing and they had to get out of there. But before they leave, John sees a woman crouched next to the Freddy, holding Charlie's hand. Doesn't know who she is, doesn't get a good look, before he's dragged out by Clay and the building collapses fully. Sometime later, Charlie's friends are at a diner mourning the loss of their friend. But as they're sitting there, a woman in a red dress pulls up to the restaurant outside, gets out of her car, and starts walking into the building. They all look, and it appears to be Charlie, alive and well. They rush forward to greet her at the door. All but one of them actually rush forward. John stays seated, watching the whole thing, and his final words of the book are, "That's not Charlie." So yeah, the book ends there with a cliffhanger, with zero explanation of what the heck just happened. Yeah, I mean, I know that they had a third book planned, but there's no resolution really to this one. There's no actual end to the story. It's just, get ready for next time. Which is a little disappointing, but overall, I still enjoyed this book. I mean, I am a sucker for murder mystery stories, whether it's novels, movies, or TV shows, anything like that. I really love those types of stories, so when we had the Springlock Murders happening and everything, I was really quite enjoying it, and it was a lot of fun. And while John is still largely there just to be Charlie's love interest, he actually gets more to do in this book and is starting to become a proper character who's much more fun to read in this one. And of course, there was that twist of Charlie just magically appearing completely unharmed at the end of the book after we saw her get crushed by Twisted Freddy. And we saw her bloody, lifeless hand hanging out of the robot. So, what exactly is going on here? Well, we're just going to have to see how the third book handles it. Finally, we have the third book, The Fourth Closet. This time, John actually gets to be the main character of the story. It's been about 6 months since the events of the last book, and he's still understandably struggling with the events of what happened. I mean, the love of his life was just crushed before his eyes, and magically appeared at the end. He's not quite so sure. He's still, as he said at the end of the last book, that's not Charlie. He still believes that. So he is going for this still depressed and unsure of what is going on. Jessica is also a main character in this book, and she's happy to have Charlie back, but she still hurts seeing the way John is acting and what he's going through, and she just wants him to be happy again, just like she is feeling. Then we have Charlie herself. She appears to be back, but she seems unsure of what actually happened that day with Twisted Freddy. She still wants John to trust her, though, despite his disbelief that it's not actually her. Final main character I'm going to put on this list is actually Carlton Burke. I looped him up in just the friends group of the first one, didn't even mention him in the second one, because I think he only showed up in the diner, if he was even there at all. But after just being the kidnapped victim in the first story, he actually gets to be a major supporting character in this one, which is, nice to see considering that his dad has taken a lot of focus in the last couple books. Alright, so those are our main characters. Let's get right into the story of The Fourth Closet. John is continuously having nightmares about what happened that day with Charlie. It's gone to the point that he's feeling depressed and completely out of energy and unable to make proper decisions that he gets fired from his construction job. He just spends a lot of his day sitting in his apartment with the what's left of Charlie's toy bunny Theodore, one of the few things that he took from her belongings right after she died. Charlie's friends have accepted that the woman that appeared at the end of the book is her, and that she's back, and she's alive, and everything's great. But John still doesn't believe it, and he's fallen completely into depression. He runs into Jessica by chance one day, and she eventually convinces him to come to a party that's going to be at Clay's house that all of their friends are going to be attending, including Charlie. See if he can talk to her, just figure out what's going on. So John tries. He tries to convince himself that everything is okay, that he can have fun at this party, that that woman there is actually Charlie. But he still doesn't quite feel that it is. He's talking to her and he questions her about stuff that only she would know, trying to figure out if it actually is the woman he loves. She answers a few of the questions right, but others she's unsure on or doesn't know. In the end, he decides not to trust her fully and still believe that his Charlie is dead. He's not alone, though. Clay actually feels like something is off with Charlie as well, so the two of them decide that they're going to talk later about this whole thing and what their thoughts on the whole situation are. When John is back home, he hears this strange voice coming from somewhere in his room. It's coming from the disembodied Theodore Rabbit-Head, and he hears the words very softly, "Shining Star, Silver Reef." He starts driving back to Clay's to tell him of what he's hearing, but on the way he sees that there is a new pizzeria open in town. Circus Baby's Pizza. And inside we have the Funtime animatronics. You got Circus Baby, you got Funtime Foxy, and Funtime Freddy. So keep that in mind, because when he arrives at Clay's house to talk to him, he thinks that he sees a strange animatronic clown girl walking away from the house into the woods. He enters the building and he finds Clay in his own kitchen, bleeding out on the floor from a stab wound. John gets Clay to the hospital and saves his life, and eventually when all the friends get there to show their support to Carlton and everything, because his dad has been stabbed and is in the hospital, he talks to Jessica about the strange voice that he's been hearing from Theodore. And they discover that there's actually a ghost town nearby called Silver Reef. So the two of them drive there together, and in the town, they find an archway that has a silver star on it, marking a path that leads to a house on the hill. They take this path, go up to the house, and they find Charlie's Aunt Jen is living there. They start talking to Jen about Charlie, and Jen is acting very strange about the whole thing, especially when she hears someone outside. She tells John and Jessica to go wait in one of the back rooms while she answers the door, and who's there but Charlie? While hiding in the back, John actually hears that voice again. Shining Star, Silver Reef. Except it's not coming from Theodore's head this time. It's coming from something in that room. He follows the sound to a large chest, and he opens it to find Charlie, curled up, asleep, mumbling those words while she's dozing. This is a fantastic twist. We've had Charlie this whole time. Turns out she's not actually Charlie. The real Charlie is still alive, but she is somehow in a box in her aunt's back room, which is really strange. Well, but the problem is they won't get the chance to ask Jen about it, because while they're back there, the fake Charlie that's out up front with Jen literally guts her and kills her. It is... Springlock deaths are gruesome, but holy crap, to have someone physically reach in, that's horrible. John picks up Charlie and carries her while he and Jessica run back to the car and escape before the fake Charlie can find them. The book has fully grabbed my attention, and we're about to have another really great scene, which has a lot of tension in it, because as they're at John's place, the fake Charlie arrives not too far behind them, smiling as if she knows she didn't just commit murder. So while Jessica goes to the door to try to stall her, John quickly hides Charlie, and eventually they let the fake Charlie in, but it's clear that she's looking around the apartment, looking for something. Eventually she goes away, agreeing to meet with John later at the place that they have their first date, but John and Jessica know that they need to keep Charlie safe, so they call their friends to help. They bring Marla and Carlton in to help, because Marla at this point is actually been trained in nurse practitioning, so she's able to take care of Charlie, where Carlton is going to join the search for more information on what is going on with fake Charlie. John starts the search by himself, where he goes to Clay's house to look around at the scene of the crime, which we now know fake Charlie is the one who stabbed him. While he's there, he finds another one of those illusion discs on the floor, and when he turns it on, he sees Ella, Charlie's childhood doll, which Clay had tried to give to her when Charlie was back, but didn't accept, which is why Clay was suspicious of this new Charlie. Being turned on the disc, and Ella suddenly morphs into what looks like an actual, realistic little girl. The illusion discs here are at work. That fake Charlie is an animatronic, not a human. In fact, John already had the answer when he saw a clown girl walking away from the building into the woods. This fake Charlie is none other than Circus Baby herself. He meets up again with Jessica and Carlton, and he goes to the restaurant where he's meeting, the fake Charlie baby on their date, but he's letting Jessica and Carlton listen to what's going on. John immediately goes off script from what the plan was, and he actually practically confronts Baby directly, letting her know that the jig is up, her charade can't stay up any longer, they know exactly who she is. She leaves, but Jessica decides to follow and see where she goes. She ends up at Circus Baby's Pizza, but before she can properly investigate, Baby shows up and knocks her out. She wakes up in a room deep inside the restaurant where she meets not only Baby, but William Afton, who is now free of his Springlock suit and looking absolutely awful. She also learns while she's here, though, that Baby is also possessed by Afton's daughter, Elizabeth. So, not just Circus Baby, this is Afton's daughter helping him carry out his new crimes. He explains that he's been trying to recreate the accident of all those robots becoming possessed by the kids he murdered, so he can try to make himself live forever. And it turns out he actually collected the OG4 animatronics and kind of fused them together into this four-headed amalgamation of all of them. And the poor kids' souls are still inside. The father-daughter duo now forces Jessica to help with a surgical operation on Afton, where he is slowly taking pieces of himself and putting it into the robot, trying to see if he can give himself eternal life in that machine. After nearly vomiting and passing out during the procedure, Jessica is then locked up in another room inside the pizzeria where she finds a bunch of kids, new kidnap victims for Afton to use in his experiments. Charlie finally wakes up, and John gets her caught up on everything that's been going on in the last 6 months. Then he asks her if those earpieces that she was working on for her school project back in the last book could be used in reverse. In her project, when she put the earpiece in, her two robotic heads that were talking would actually notice her and talk to her. But if they reverse the wires on it, maybe they can have the opposite effect and hide them from animatronics. They decide to give it a try, and Carlton goes to Jessica's place to get it, because Jessica also had a bunch of Charlie's stuff when she supposedly died. And he finds the earpiece and crosses the wires, and he immediately has to test it because Elizabeth has arrived. He puts on the earpiece when she's getting real close, wanting to give him a kiss, but actually wanting to rip his face off. And immediately, he disappears from her view, she can't find him, and she eventually leaves. The earpiece works. They know what they're going to do. When he arrives with the two earpieces that he found in there, he continues to take one, and he gives the other one to Marla, and the two of them plan to go to Circus Baby's to look for Jessica, while John stays at his place with Charlie. After they leave, though, Charlie and John don't stay put. Charlie wants to go see where she was found in Silver Reef, and so she and John go there together. Marla and Carlton break into the pizzeria, and they find Jessica locked into that room deep inside of it with the other kids, and they're like, great, let's get out of here. But Jessica says that one of the kids there had already been taken by Mangle, and they needed to go find him. Carlton gives her his earpiece and decides that he's going to go find that kid, while Jessica and Marla go take the other kids and escape. Both groups, the rescue party with the kids and Carlton by himself, managed to dodge the Funtime animatronics with Freddy and Foxy hunting them down. Eventually, the kids and Marla and Jessica get out of the building, and Carlton finds the kid in Afton's laboratory. Afton stabs Carlton in the heart with a syringe that has glowing hot metal in it, and Carlton collapses onto the ground. Pretty much dead at this point. Just like that. And Afton's like, oh well, that experiment failed. I'll try something different. In case you couldn't tell, he's completely gone mad scientist psycho in this one. As if he wasn't insane before, now he's got the whole mad scientist thing going. Meanwhile, John and Charlie have arrived at Jen's house in Silver Reef, and John finds Henry's suicide note, which is strangely written because as he's writing, he's acting as if Charlie is the one who's dead and not Sammy, when he's talking about the loss that he had. Charlie also finds that in one of the closets there in the house is the endoskeleton that her dad used to take his own life. They don't really get time to process this, though, because Elizabeth has arrived as well. And she almost immediately knocks out John, so he's unconscious for the next large portion of the story. She then turns to Charlie and reveals the twisted truth behind both of their creations. Not just the fact that, she was a little girl who was killed by this robot, by Circus Baby, But it wasn't even Afton that originally built Baby. It was Charlie's dad, Henry. Because Charlie isn't actually Charlie. Hold on for a second, allow me to explain. Charlie was who was killed back, like, whatever it was now, like 15 plus years ago. It was Charlie that was killed. Not her brother Sammy. Her brother Sammy is alive. Doesn't even know that this current version of Charlie even exists. Henry built 4 robots to represent the different stages of his daughter's life, and that was what was inside of those strange closets underneath the house that Charlie saw when they were escaping the collapsing pizzeria. Now, I personally really hate this twist. I'll talk about it more in my summary of the book, but just know the reveal of Charlie never being human just ruins the story for me. Meanwhile, Carlton wakes up in what appears to be a bright, strange version of the original Freddy's Pizzeria. He sees a bunch of, like, children occasionally flash into, like, robotic form, then back to children, running around the room, trying to catch these flying pieces of paper. And underneath one of the tables, he sees his old friend Michael, working fervently on a drawing and taping some pieces of paper back together. He also sees Spring Bonnie, mirroring the actions of what William is doing in real life at that moment. The kids say that Bonnie is their friend, and they're just trying to work with him and help him. That's when Carlton realizes that they don't remember what happened. Those pages flying around are their memories. They don't know that Afton is the bad guy, that he's the one who took their lives from them. And so he starts helping them collect their papers so they can bring them and put them back together. Their memories are restored, and Carlton explains that Afton is actually the bad guy, and then they need to stop him because he's about to take another victim. And after that, the robot in real life that has all the souls possessing it comes to life. The amalgamation grabs Afton and then it drags him into the nearby furnace in the lab, reducing both of them to ash. Pretty brutal, but fitting death for, William Afton, of all characters. This was very satisfying to read that part of the chapter. Back in Silver Reef, unaware of her father's fate, Elizabeth is continuing to explain what Charlie's origins are to her. Charlie is in total disbelief. Because there is no unlike Circus Baby is possessed by Elizabeth, the robotic body that Charlie has doesn't have original Charlie's soul. The soul that Charlie has was, created when Henry poured all of his grief and his anguish and his anger into this Ella doll that Charlie used to have. And to prove it, Elizabeth literally punches into Charlie's chest and pulls out the Ella doll, revealing that everything that she said is true. Charlie is a robot, and that doll has an artificial soul that actually is her. Charlie starts, her body starts immediately shutting down with that doll outside of her, but she manages to build up the strength to grab a nearby paperweight and smash it across Elizabeth's robotic face, grab the Ella doll, and then run towards a nearby closet. Elizabeth follows her and corners her, but then Charlie reaches behind her and flicks a switch on the endoskeleton that killed her dad. It lunges forward, and the knife plunges through Elizabeth, the Ella doll, and Charlie, killing both of the robotic girls, with Charlie's last words being, "I love you too, John." The group reunites at the hospital where Carlton is now recovering. His life was saved by his friend Michael before he and the other kids moved on to the next life. They gave him the gift of being able to live again after stabbed a bunch of soul juice into his chest. But Carlton is alive, his dad's awake as well from his injuries, and all the kids that Afton and Elizabeth had kidnapped recently were keeping inside of Circus Baby's pizza are free and alive and okay. Charlie, though, is dead, but only John knows this. He hasn't told the others and doesn't plan to. As far as the rest of them are concerned, Charlie is just missing again. And Clay is planning to keep looking for her, even though John knows it is going to be a fruitless effort. John leaves from the rest of the group and he drives over to the graveyard there in Hurricane. And there he walks over and he finds the real Charlie's grave. She never even made it past 3 years old this whole time. But as he's standing there over the grave, he gets the feeling that somebody's watching him. He turns around and he sees a woman holding out her hand to him. He accepts her hand, and the two of them walk off together as the story comes to a close. It's implied here that the woman that John sees is Charlie. She presumably was able to take over the, older body, the Circus Baby body that Elizabeth had been possessing. It's just not explained. In fact, they're graphic novels of all of these, and I've been using a couple of their images here in this video. But when the graphic novel released, it made it pretty abundantly clear that this is supposed to be Charlie. It's just a little more vague in the book. I guess they're trying to say that maybe because the endo stabbed through the doll before it stabbed Charlie, and like all of them were on the same knife blade, that's how she was able to like move her soul into the other robot. I don't know. It's confusing, but I guess they're trying to say that Charlie survived all this. I'm not really sure. But speaking of Charlie, I need to talk about that twist because it is my least favorite part of this series. Now, it's not like the books did nothing to set this up. Looking back, there's actually quite a few parts in both of the books that came before The Fourth Closet where there's lines that are actually setting up the fact that Charlie is a robot. For example, Marla's talking to Charlie in Chapter 3 of The Silver Eyes, and she says, "You're as pale as ever, and you're all clammy. Don't you ever get warm?" Also, when John and Charlie find the newspaper together about Afton's first killing at Fredbear's family diner, the book makes sure to note that neither of the twins were named in the article. So it actually was Charlie that went missing. The article never actually named her, so they just assumed it was talking about Sammy. Also in Chapter 11 of The Silver Eyes, Afton is talking to Charlie, and he locks eyes with her for a moment, and he leans in closer and goes, "Oh, you're something beautiful, aren't you?" Because he recognizes that she is a machine, and he is impressed by the technology that Henry has created. And the twisted ones, there's a couple times, like when Charlie and John reunite. He looks at her and he says, "You look exactly the same," like after the whole, "Oh man, look at you, John, you've grown taller." And he says, "Yeah, but you look exactly the same, Charlie." Also, when Clay was talking to Charlie about the fake blood that they found on the scene of Afton's Springlock, it wasn't Afton's blood. He actually bled real blood. Charlie's blood is the one that they found there from her injuries that she sustained during those events. Final example I want to bring out here is where John is talking to Charlie and he says, "Look at this, a photo of you when you were no bigger than her," and he gestured towards Ella. Because Ella was Charlie, one of Charlie's original bodies. Henry built 4 of them, different stages of her life: toddler, child, teenager, and adult. We were at Teen Charlie as our main character that we were following. The Ella robot was Kid Charlie. We had Toddler Charlie that we never really saw. And then we had Adult Charlie, which is Circus Baby. Now, I want to be clear. It's not the fact that she's a robot that bothers me. I mean, this is a series that is full of people possessing robots and people possessing their own corpses and all kinds of weird stuff like that. But the difference is, all those times, it was actually a soul possessing that machine or that body. Charlie in these books never had a real soul. It was kind of like an artificial soul created, like I said, by Henry's grief and his guilt that he poured, and his physical tears that he poured into the Ella doll that kind of created a fake Charlie soul. That is the issue I have with this. It means that this entire time we've been following a character who's never actually been human. If they had just made it where it was real Charlie's soul possessing the robot and somehow Henry was able to move the soul, like maybe her real soul was in the doll and he moved the doll from robot to robot so that she could grow up, that would be fine with me. But that's not the book makes it explicitly clear that she is not actually Charlie, and that to me completely ruins the character, because I thought she was a great character up until the 3rd book, and it just kind of completely ruined it for me. So overall, the book gave me, a satisfying death for Afton, like I said, where he's pulled into the furnace by the original kids that he killed. But in the end, I just felt frustrated after I read the last page because I hated what they did to Charlie. Alright, it is time to rank these 3 books against each other. You can see them here on the side of the screen. Number 1, I have to put the first one, The Silver Eyes. It is, like I said, the most tonally in line with the game series. Charlie has an intriguing character set up with her mysterious backstory. Even if her supporting characters, like her friends around her, are kind of one-dimensional, she's still an interesting character that I was immediately invested in the story of. And it was also, like I said, the first time that William Afton's name was actually mentioned in Five Nights at Freddy's media. And this was before Sister Location came out and confirmed that that's his name in the games as well. So this book is really great, and I have to put it at the number 1 spot. Going in order, I have to put The Twisted Ones at number 2. It focuses on fewer people in the story, so it's much easier to care about the characters, with John, Jessica, and Clay actually being able to shine as proper supporting characters for Charlie. And Twisted Foxy's jump scare where he tries to grab and kill Charlie at the halfway point of the book is, like I said, my favorite scene in this entire series. It's really, really good. And the ending where Charlie gets crushed legitimately left me shocked, and I wanted to know more after it left us with that cliffhanger. I think my biggest complaint about this book is just the fact that the whole scene when Charlie's in the underground, like FNAF 2-esque location with all the Balloon Boy armies, it's just a little too weird to read. Like, they go completely sci-fi mind warping in this, and it was making my brain hurt just reading it. That's my only real major complaint, besides Charlie making stupid decisions. But story-wise and like direction-wise, that was the weirdest part for me. And at the bottom of the list, at number 3, I should not be surprised with how I just talked about it, is The Fourth Closet. I'll admit that I really liked the tension that it had once John knew who the fake Charlie actually was. Well, even if he didn't know who it was, but he knew it wasn't fake Charlie and that she was dangerous. The whole scene where he has to try to hide Charlie while Elizabeth is looking around for her, I really loved that scene. And John himself is at his best in this book. He's truly a fantastic character. He actually had an arc in this whole story. But in the end, other than, I can't force myself to look past the whole Charlie not being an actual soul thing. On top of that, there's also the whole surgery scene with Afton, I feel like was just far too graphic for no reason. It went into gory detail describing like cutting out his kidney and putting it into the robot, and I was like, this doesn't seem necessary. Like, why are we reading this in complete detail here? I don't understand what point this is serving in the story, other than saying Afton has completely lost his mind at this point. So, yeah, ironically, in order, I'm actually ranking these books 1, 2, 3, just like that. Silver Eyes, Twisted Ones, and The Fourth Closet. This is how I rank these books. Again, a pretty solid trilogy until the very end. Again, I like the first half of The Fourth Closet. Then it all started going downhill, and then they revealed Charlie to be not a real person, and it just completely fell off a cliff for me. But yeah, that's going to do it for this first episode of Eabs Book Club. I'm not going to have a proper schedule for these videos. It's just going to be like, when I have one ready, I'll put one on the schedule when I announce the videos for the month. And I already know what I'm going to be doing for the next few videos. Next time will probably either be the Bendy books, which I need to start writing the script for that, or depending on how long it takes me to get to that with like free time and everything, I could do a video on the Book of Bill, the upcoming Gravity Falls book that is coming out. Either way, I'm going to be doing videos on both of those. It's just the order of those is going to depend on like how far along the Bendy script is by the time Book of Bill comes out. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. What did you think of the books? Let me down by dropping a like and leave a comment down below. Never subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you all on the next one. Bye, guys!